Today's lesson for social studies is in your My World Social Studies fourth grade book. And the lesson is the Texas Gold, and it is chapter 8, lesson 3. And it begins on page 296. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and begin. The railroad boom helped Texas grow. By 1900, Texas cities and industries were growing fast. Texas' biggest boom, however, was still to come. So if you remember, the population was growing, but there was something bigger that was going to happen. Black gold at Spindletop. The presence of natural oil, let me move this real quick, or petroleum in Texas had been known for hundreds of years before Europeans arrived in the area. When Spanish conquistadors came to the area, they used the natural tar that forms when crude oil seeps to the surface to cover holes or cracks in their ships. The first oil wells were drilled in Nacogdoches County. Those were the first oil wells. They produced only a small amount of oil. At that time, demand for oil was low, and so was the price. So the oil field was not developed. Right here, Batillo Higgins, who lived in Beaumont, he owned a brick making company. He wanted an even burning fuel source for making bricks. Spindletop Hill was a salt dome south of Beaumont. Higgins believed that oil and gas could be found beneath the salt dome, so he bought about half of Spindletop. Higgins began drilling for oil in 1893 in hopes of finding a fuel source for making bricks. He was unsuccessful, so the oil field was not developed. 6 years later, in 1899, Batillo Higgins hired Captain Anthony F. Lucas to help with finding oil at Spindletop. Their discovery at Spindletop helped drive industrialization and urbanization in Texas. January 10th, 1901 was the day to remember. Lucas had drilled down 1,139 feet. Suddenly, with a sound like a cannon, mud shot out of the well. Next came a cloud of gas. Finally, oil, also called black gold. It gushed out. The powerful gusher or flow of oil blasted high into the air. And if you look on the page before that, that is what it was gushing, what it looked like, the gusher. All right, Texas oil fields. Lucas and Higgins' discovery at Spindletop was Texas' first major oil well. Their discovery, so it was the first major oil well at Spindletop. Their discovery would soon spur urbanization in Texas. Urbanization means, I'm going to try to squeeze this in there, cities. In 1902, Spindletop alone produced more than 17 million barrels, or 94% of the state's total in oil. Over the next 3 years, other major oil fields were developed in the area around Spindletop. They included Sour Lake, Batson, and Humboldt. Between 1902 and 1910, drillers found oil in north central Texas with spots at Brownwood, Petronila, Wichita Falls. In the years that followed, many more wells were drilled. The oil business was booming. It says, identify and circle the earliest oil field. It was here on Saratoga, and that one was in 1887. It says, draw a box around, we're going to draw a box around the latest oil fields shown on the map. And we're going to start with Burnett in 1918, Breckenridge in also 1918, Desdemona in 1918, Hull in 1918, and West Columbia also in 1918. Alright, moving on. So, new uses for oil. New uses for oil. And if you look at that photo, it says the use of cars grew quickly in Texas in the 1920s. Whoops, I skipped a page. Where's that page? There it is, sorry. Alright, an oil boom in Texas. I was trying to go ahead of myself. The Lucas Gusher was big news. Thousands of people rushed to the region around Spindletop. Beaumont had been a town of, before, remember, that's where Patio Higgins moved. It only had 9,000 people. In just a few months, it grew to 50,000 people. Most newcomers were in the oil business. Some bought land and drilled for oil. Others sold drilling equipment. So they bought land and drilled for oil. They sold drilling equipment. Workers also moved to Beaumont to get jobs. Beaumont became a center of industrialization in Texas. The newcomers ran drills or built pipelines to move the oil to refineries. So an oil refinery is a factory that cleans and processes oil into products such as gasoline or kerosene. Many refineries were built along the Gulf Coast. From its ports there, Texas shipped oil to countries all over the world. In 1918, oil was flowing in Electra, Burke Burnett, and other Texas cities. The development of the oil industry meant more jobs and money for Texas. By 1928, Texas was the nation's leading oil producer. And on question number 3, you're just going to use the little map that it provides to answer the questions, the bullets that it's asking about. Alright, so now we're going to move on to new uses for oil. Question number 4 up above says, describe how the car was an innovation that benefit individuals in Texas. So how would a car benefit an individual? Remember we talked about that in the other lesson. So new uses for oil. During the Texas boom, oil was plentiful and cheap. Many people found new uses for oil. Railroads and ships began to use oil instead of coal. The discovery of oil benefited many individuals in Texas. In the early 1900s, many Texans, they began to drive cars. Every year, more and more cars were seen on Texas roads. Cars ran on gasoline, that was an oil product. As the number of cars rose, so did the demand for oil. The new cars also needed paved roads. Petroleum was used to make the pavement. That's the kind of roads that we drive on now. So these are benefits. Oil changed life on the farm too. Farmers had always used horses and mules to pull the equipment. Now they began to use tractors. The tractors ran on, of course, gasoline. With gasoline-powered equipment, farmers could plant and harvest more land. So farms got larger. After the oil boom, Texas became more industrialized. The number of factories increased because cheap oil was used to power the machines in the factories. This spurred urbanization in Texas. Many Texans from small farms sold their land and went to work in the new factories in towns and cities. As the years passed, people found many more uses for oil. Paint, for example, is made from oil. So are many lotions and medicines. Even the lip balm you use for your chapped lips is an oil product. Plastic is one of the most common items made from oil. And from clothes to cars to containers, plastic is used to make countless products. So this is the uses of oil. And you see right there the illustration, the tractor is being used by a farmer. And they're able to farm more land with a tractor as opposed to wagons and horses. All right, drawing conclusions. You're going to describe how scientific discoveries and innovations in energy have benefited Texas. So you're looking at scientific discoveries and innovations. All right, so we're moving on. The gas industry in Texas. During the Texas oil boom, the drillers found more than oil. They also discovered natural gas. Oil and gas deposits are often in the same area. Over time, natural gas becomes a major industry in Texas. So oil and gas deposits are often in the same area, and over time, it became a major industry. Like oil, natural gas formed millions of years ago. As plants and animals died, their remains were covered with sand and mud. Over time, the sand and mud turned into rock, trapping the remains. Eventually, the heat and pressure from the earth changed the remains into gas. To reach this gas, well drillers cut through the rock above it. The first gas well in Texas was built in 1907. This well was part of the Petronila oil field near Wichita Falls. A businessman named Edwin Brown contributed to the urbanization of Texas. He began piping gas to nearby cities and towns. By 1913, his company, the Lone Star Gas, was supplying this clean burning fuel to Dallas and Fort Worth. More towns became urban centers. As in Dallas and Fort Worth, gas was piped to towns and cities near gas deposits. At first, gas was mainly used to heat furnaces and water heaters, but by the late 1880s, manufacturers started selling stove fueled by gas. Eventually, gas became a major source of power for industry. Natural gas can be used for steel, glass, paper, clothing, brick, and electricity. These are used in the United States and around the world. Natural gas pipelines. Supplying gas to consumers was not very easy. Gas companies had to build pipelines. These underground pipes stretched from gas wells to homes and factories. Some were hundreds of miles long. Building and caring for the pipelines became major industry. Most gas pipelines led to cities, not the countryside. The new clean fuel was a benefit for city life. Factories and businesses opened the places where they could get natural gas that helped cities grow. Today, Texas has more natural gas pipelines than any other state. All right, a big discovery. So in 1925, a major natural gas field was discovered in the Texas Panhandle in Amarillo. It produced more than 100 million cubic feet of gas a day. A new town, Borger, sprang up. Thousands of people rushed to the boomtown. Population of Amarillo soon tripled. Panhandle gas supplied jobs and wealth. Over 75 years, it had 8 trillion cubic feet of gas. Today, Texas produces more natural gas than any other state, and it's 30% of our country's natural gas. All right, so you're going to answer your questions from the passage, and here's your assignment. So suppose you lived in Texas when oil was discovered at Spindletop, and you have an opportunity to buy land in Beaumont. You're going to write a list of pros and cons on buying the land, and then you're going to write a paragraph explaining if you would buy the land or not. Take a picture, send it to your teacher, and that is your social studies on Texas Gold.